Apostle, the latest book by David Annandale, gives us a new insight into why anybody would ever join the Servants of Chaos. Why would you ever do that? Like, as fans of Warhammer 40k, it seems so mad, right? You're pretty much definitely going to be turned into a chaos spawn if you join the forces of chaos. So what possible arguments could any servant of not just Chaos Undivided, but any servant of chaos use to bring you to their side? And the thing that I really liked about this book is that it gives us a genuine attempt at that happening. So when you read 40k novels, there's kind of different ways authors can write the conversion of characters to chaos. Most of the time, it's kind of stuff that happens like off screen. So it's going to be things like, Lorgar stepped up and gave an incredible sermon and everyone bowed down to him and it was incredibly convincing. But the thing that I really liked about this novel, which I think is really important to praise, is that he actually makes a genuine stab at writing sermons, or writing literature as to what the word bearers would actually say to try and recruit new chaos cultists, which is pretty badass. This is one of my favorite passages, for example, looking at a different book for a second. So during the Siege of Terra, of course, Horus arrives and he hasn't got his greatest asset from the beginning, which is, of course, millions upon millions of demons unleashed upon Terra. And this character that you see in the background, Zardu Layak, who is kind of his replacement for Erebus after Erebus pisses him off and Lorgar betrays him. Erebus gets too big for his boots and Lorgar attempts to run a coup. So you can see why. So they're both largely gone from Horus's side by this point. But Zardu Layak has kind of stepped up. And when he comes down to the surface of Terra, because most of the time, I'll be honest, this guy spends his life just kind of stalking Abaddon. It's quite funny. Abaddon does not like the guy. And we get this brilliant passage where, of course, when he's talking to the citizens of Terra, he can't talk to them like they're the god of change, disease, decay, excess. So he has to kind of give it a little bit of a twist. So he says, Zeech, the god of knowledge, Sanesh, the god of pleasure, Nurgle, the god of endless life. But he does say Khorne, the god of war, because of course there's not really a positive spin that you can put upon Khorne. Even putting like Khorne, the god of like honorable combat, it's just too niche of a title realistically. So if you're going to try and sell the forces of chaos, you need to try and use a new angle, because ultimately we know too much about what it's really like to serve Nurgle that no one in their right mind is ever going to do that, or serving Zeech. It's always going to be a disaster. And in this novel, I'll talk about the plot first just for a bit. We get a really cool insight into a word bearer largely on his own trying to take over a planet. Because this word bearer, his hoster, the Eightfold Bane, is basically destroyed at the start of the book, almost to a man, and so he ends up landing on a planet called Legator, which is the planet where he was originally from, and he decides to try and take over this planet. So he uses his oratory skills, he uses his sermons to try and reach out to others, and he's able to bring bishops over to his side, cardinals over to his side. He can't bring Sisters of Battle into worshipping the dark gods, but he does a pretty decent job. And as the word bearers grow more and more powerful, we sort of uncover more kind of conspiracies within the world. And the reason he's so successful really is, of course, because the Imperium at its worst is cartoonishly evil. The Imperium on this planet has got like a class system that's just incomprehensible for us, even in this day and age, where you've got these hieroglyphs and lower glyphs on the world, where the difference in their income or the difference in their standard of living is so great. For a lot of his work and for a lot of his followers' work, it's kind of child's play, and his servants become known as the Raptured, and they go out and they kind of spread word throughout the planet and cause kind of attacks upon landing base and all this sorts of thing. And eventually they realize that actually the word bearers have been here before. They find kind of hidden secret word bearers, battle plates distributed throughout the planet. And this world, which is a scribe world, Legator, it's a world where the works of the ecclesiarchy are written down, ironically means that the people on this planet spend their time writing down the words of Carestus's gene father, Lorgar Aurelian, because of course it was Lorgar which wrote the Book of Lorgar, which comes the basis for the Imperial Creed, quite hilariously. And as the book continues, the Sisters of Battle, which were the order that originally destroyed his host, they end up, of course, coming back to kind of finish the job, and we get some fantastic scenes where one of Carestus's servants is actually put into a penitent engine, and he has to fight that penitent engine, and then by the end of the book, he is mortally wounded by the Palatine Azura, because of course she wants to finish the job that she started at the beginning of the novel. The story ends with the Sisters of Battle leaving the planet to commit the world to exterminatus, and Carestus realizes that his purpose in the story is actually to sacrifice himself and sacrifice the planet, and he does so, creating a warp rift. Throughout the novel, we see him kind of make deals with the Chaos Gods in multiple ways. He loses an eye. Sometimes when he sends his soul into the warp, we see like wounds open up all over his body. It's a pretty horrific journey, and in the end he realizes that his job is just to sacrifice himself and the world, which he does so, and thankfully he is saved by his apothecary, who grabs him at the end of the novel. So this story might very well get a sequel at some point in the future, because yeah, he is still alive. The Sisters of Battle may have survived at the end of the novel. If they survived the warp rift, we don't really know, but yeah, there very much could be a sequel to this, so I'm pretty excited for it. The kinds of arguments that Carestus uses in the story: "There's fire, I expect." Carestus brought his hands together in a single deafening clap. "You mistake what is happening, Bishop. One of us is wed to lies, and it is not me. I am a word-bearer. By the very nature of my legion, I am a witness to the truth. That is my purpose. That is my being. And this is the truth. My Primarch, the demon prince Lorgar, is the creator of your false religion." Rage filled Borthus's face, and it looked like relief. Carestus pressed on before the bishop could retort. "Your faith is a farce, and a construction of enfolded irony. It is worship rejected even by the false emperor." There's a few things that are just so wonderfully ironic when we're talking about the Imperial Truth and the Forces of Chaos, because, as I mentioned, Lorgar Aurelian, who doesn't get a lot of mentions in this book, but of course he has to be brought up because this is a scribe world, and they are literally spending their days writing down the words of Lorgar, repeating them over and over as they write down these words. And that is a throwback to the early days of the Horus Heresy, where in the first books of the Heresy, we kind of see the beginnings of the Imperial cult, and they literally come from books of Lorgar, which are the original records that Lorgar wrote down during the Great Crusade, before he turned to chaos, and back when he worshipped his father as a god. And of course, this is a huge thing that Carestus can use against the Imperials, because he's pointing out to them this incredible irony. And as we'll look at in a sec, he also has to point out that the emperor himself literally denied that he's a god. So if you want to try and undermine someone's faith, you're pointing out that the book that these Imperials worship was written by his Primarch, who now worships other gods, and the emperor who is talking about literally denied that he is a god. And furthermore, this is all going on top of the continual references to just how hard life is for normal people on this scribe world, and of course how the fact that the impact of the Chaos Gods is visible. At the start of the book, when the Imperials are found by the word bearers, naturally they say the phrase that we all know and love: "The Emperor protects." And Carestus has a brilliant response for this. "If the Emperor protects, why am I on this ship? Why are you at my mercy? Your only guarantor of life is my goodwill, and we all know that. And I ask again, protect you from what? Do you even know what I am?" He paused. "What do you know of the true gods?" "Nothing. Nothing at all." He laughed. "If you will hear me, I will teach you many things. One of the greatest lessons you will learn is the nature of irony. Thus, know this: what the false emperor seeks to protect you from is the gods you are never to know exist. I know the truth of your creed to a depth you can never expect to reach." Fantastic response, of course, because the Emperor protects is something that every child in the Imperium, every soldier utters, and it's thought to be the thing that is always going to keep you safe. And the message of the Emperor protects is a really important one in Warhammer 40k, because it's not just talking about the idea of how the Emperor is going to literally intervene in your life to make sure that you're safe, but it's also referring to the fact that when you die in Warhammer 40k, your soul will ascend into the warp, or it will ascend into the afterlife, however it's preached on the planet. And the Emperor is the only thing that is going to be able to protect you in the afterlife. And it's one of those things that's not particularly dived into too much, but as far as we know, that is kind of true. The people who do worship the Emperor as a god, they are the ones that will be saved. And of course, being able to take that and turn it on its head is a fantastic way to just destroy the faith of those in the Imperial Creed, because if you spent your life believing that your faith in the God Emperor is the thing that's going to protect you in this life and the next, but at the same time you've been taught that things like demons are not real, all of a sudden you're questioning, can the Emperor actually protect you? And that's the thing that comes up in the novel, that the Imperials on the planet, the lower castes, they don't know if demons are actually real. They think they're just kind of a myth, because of course the Inquisition and the Ecclesiarchy suppresses almost all knowledge about the actual Horus heresy and the nature of the Primarchs, and the fact that Lorgar himself was a son of the Emperor. So being able to corrupt that phrase is so important, and this part in the book, he's winning people over to his side pretty quickly. "Let the lie be purged away with its utterance," said Carastus. "Burn it away with the flame of truth. Look upon yourselves. Reflect upon the misery of your existence. This is what fidelity to the Imperial Creed has brought you. This is what the false Emperor has bequeathed you." He paused and let the murmurs begin again. "No more," he shouted. His voice shook the cavern with its power. Scraps of pages drifted down from the walls and ceilings. The people gasped. "I bring you freedom. I bring you the truth of chaos undivided. I bring you the shattering of chains." The Wordbearer's argument is of course going to be that the Imperium is actually the thing that is destroying humanity. And if you actually want to have any semblance of freedom, aligning yourself with a Chaos Guard, whilst of course it's going to mean that your soul might belong to them, your actual actions, the things you can do in your life, are going to now be in your own control. And so his argument here is going to be that you should basically just you basically have nothing to lose by joining the forces of chaos. And it doesn't help that in most Warhammer 40k books where you have something equivalent to this, like in the Wordbearer's trilogy, the Imperium is kind of cartoonishly evil most of the time. And in this book, when the sisters, in particular, when the Palatine, when she's talking about the Imperial, when she's talking about dealing with the traitors, we get a much more kind of pragmatic view, but it's still unbelievably brutal. So like her mentality is much more that it doesn't matter if the attacks of the Sisters of Battle, an exterminatus, a bombardment shell, it doesn't matter if those attacks destroy those loyal to the Emperor, because if there is chaos on a planet, if there is chaos on a system, if you're actually a servant of the Emperor, you'll already be dead. And so you're going to be saved by him. So they have no qualms about just committing themselves to actions that they know will kill those that are in service to the Master of Mankind. So even in this book, which makes kind of a more of an attempt to put the ideals of the Imperium against the sermons of the Servants of Chaos, it's still a pretty a brutal display of Imperium governorship. Anyway, do you think that if Wordbearers remained loyal and Biggie still became a god, they would be able to manifest the Sisters of Battle miracles at will? So there's not too many examples of that, because in First Heretic, it's a lot of this all happens kind of off screen in the book, but when the word bearers fall to chaos, they don't have to do a huge amount of purging of their legion, because most of them pretty much fall in line with Lorgar. And of course, this is a big challenge that some of the other legions have, because for the Alpha Legion, the Night Lords, they can't afford to kind of have a Istvan 3 type event necessarily, because they don't want to attract the attention of the loyalists. So a lot of them have to purge their legions kind of in secret. But when the word bearers do it, they basically, they don't have too much to accomplish, because most of the Lorgar sons have been spurned by the Emperor, gone through the same journey he has, and seen the existence now of demons and chaos. So they pretty much just fall in line. The Anchorite is probably the most famous example of a loyalist word bearer in 40k. I guess you have Barthus and Narek, but yeah, he's not really a religious worshipper of the Emperor and trying to summon Sisters of Battle or anything. But yeah, the Anchorite doesn't seem to have that kind of ability as of yet. But in theory, that kind of thing would work, I guess. The way the Emperor's kind of god type abilities like that manifest in the setting vary a lot. Like there's the Order of the Golden Light, I think they're called, which is a Sisters of Battle order, which is apparently like an entire army of saints. So a loyalist word bearers force could in theory be like revived by the Emperor or something, but it's like that's codex law, so it's not something that's ever dived into in the novels or anything like that. But maybe one day we will do. Did you see the new ep with the sisters? The Orcs mentioned that Gaz is going to Armageddon. You think this is like a setup for 11th edition? This is from the new Word Bearers book. I missed the intro. Interesting. Is that for like a Warhammer Plus thing? Is that what you're talking about? Like a video of the sisters? But Gaz going to Armageddon definitely makes sense. I think that, yeah, I mean, yeah, it seems pretty expected at this point, because there's not too much more we can really do on Armageddon now that Angron has been defeated. Like, there's always conflict on Armageddon, but like, let's be honest, like most of the big emphasis on Armageddon is on the summoning of Angron or the summoning of the kind of actions of Ghazghkull. So yeah, I guess it's sort of the next thing to do, really. It seems inevitable. Because Angron in theory can just keep being summoned, so they could keep trying to bring him back. But when they banished him, you know, it was a pretty big feat, and the Grey Knights, if you haven't read that story, they used the remnants of Angron's own blade to banish him. So it was I don't think he's gonna be coming back anytime soon. Yes, the show. Interesting. Yes, I mean, yeah. Erebus the goat. So, like, it's interesting that you mentioned Erebus. It's kind of one of the reasons that I thought of this topic, because Erebus most of the time in these sorts of stories is like, we don't really see him doing too much preaching like this. So most of the time Erebus is so high ranked within the Legion that he is more of the sacrificing people for sermons, committing rituals, accomplishing incredible feats. So we don't really see him do too much preaching. He's worm tongue, I guess, to Horus, you know, he's whispering in his ear. But yeah, this guy, like Kerastus, is much more kind of like on the ground, trying to win over either just cultists or bishops, and trying to start a rising in that respect, which is pretty interesting. What do you think Phil Kelly's permanent move to the 40K Black writing team leadership will bring? Yeah, I have seen this. Yeah, it's interesting. So I don't hate Phil Kelly's Tau books, I think, as much as other people do. So I do hate War of Secrets. I think War of Secrets is rubbish. I think that, yeah, it's just like, I like the Dark Angels being assholes at times. I just sort of think that they're only written well if they're in any way engaging in how they do it, and there's any kind of logic to their actions. But what he's cooking for the Tau is actually, I don't think, that bad. So most of the Tau books that he writes take place quite a bit before like the current 40k timeline. So we have like the most recent, like Farsight book, for example, is still the equivalent is like 7th edition lore. So it's still a bit behind where we are right now. But he has pressed on with Shadow Sun and the lore around Talvar, the new kind of Tau god. So that is definitely something he is cooking. He's brought Orn Shi back into the Tau Empire in the most recent Farside book, and it looks like we're going to get a genuine kind of push forward for the Tau Empire as a cohesive and unified and sensible force. Because the biggest problem with his writing, which I think he might be recognizing, is that his depictions of the ethereals, and in particular Orn Var, are so kind of cartoonishly evil. It's not, there's really no defense of the Tau Empire whilst he's the supreme ethereal. Now, whilst in his novels, Orn Var is still alive, in modern 40k, Orn Var is dead. So now that Orn Var has died, we can have like a new Tau Empire and a new leader, and that will actually be really good for the setting. So it depends what he does, but like if they gave him... Yeah, I mean, his writing will always be a little bit skeptical. I mean, it's... Yeah, I don't know how all that's gone down, because it looks like what's happened, if you're not familiar, is that he was like a head writer, or maybe he owned the narrative, like metaphorically, for Age of Sigmar, and then that, like, his writing is not being binned, but they're kind of moving on from it. They're sort of leaving that behind as like a previous age of the setting, and they're having like a new end times basically for it. So it's yeah, it's a whole controversy. It's going a bit crazy on the Age of Sigmar side. Erebus is a total dick. However, his story is the most interesting. I mean, he sort of, like, you sort of would be sad if he died because he is such a dick, right? Do you know what I mean? Like, he brings a lot to his character, to the story in that respect. What about the Psychic Awakening book about Farsight? I might also be thinking of Arcs of Omen, but I remember there being relatively recent Farsight lore in terms of timeline. Yeah, I think you're probably thinking of Arcs of Omen. So in Arcs of Omen, Farsight briefly falls to Khorne, basically, is what it is, which is something that Phil Kelly kind of set up before. So in Crisis of Faith, I think is that book, we get this perspective, this POV aspect of like a demon, and they basically imply that both Zeech and Khorne are interested in Farsight, which is very rare because the Chaos Gods don't really care about the Tau, because the Tau have such small souls, so they're not very delicious, not very tasty for them. So for the Chaos Gods to be at all interested in any of the Tau is quite notable, but they also sort of hate the Tau, so they would like to turn Farsight to their cause. And pretty much any civil war you can create within the Tau is going to be relatively catastrophic, because within the Tau, they're not humanity. So within the Tau, you can't go back to what they call the time of Montau. The time of Montau is the time before the Ethereals came, when all of the castes were fighting against each other. And the Ethereals came, sort of settled all of this, and so that's why the Ethereals aren't able to kill Farsight in modern 40k, even if they want to, because Tau can't kill Tau. It's not allowed. So if you could get Farsight to properly invade the Tau Empire, then you would basically destroy it. Probably wouldn't come back from. But yeah, it would be a good plot line. I think. Yeah, like it would be really good to have a follow-up to that as a novel, because when it comes to Farsight in his books, of course, he's in the Tau Empire, so he's very naive to the ways of chaos. There's a bit in I think it's Crisis of Faith again, where he gets in a Cold Star suit and he goes over to a Space Marine ship, the Scarlords, and he disables it. And as the Gela drive fails and demons start manifesting on the vessel, he doesn't really understand what they are. He just thinks they're like pets of the Space Marines, which is pretty fun. Gav has started collecting word bearers. I wonder if he will do a book on them. Oh, interesting. Yeah, that's good to know. I mean, I thought this book was pretty good, I think. I definitely think you'll enjoy it if you're a word bearers fan. And like I say, it's kind of nice to get like a genuine attempt at writing, people writing sermons, people writing actual attempts to persuade people to chaos, because just having it all done off screen, or just having the forces of chaos be so cartoonishly evil that there's just nothing redeeming about them, it just, it doesn't really work. Yes, this is from the new Word Bearers book. Yeah, so it came out a while ago. So I think at some point I need to do more like deep dives into the legions, and this is definitely a good one to use. So I'm glad I read it, but I need to also read the new Ghost Legion book, which will be out Actually, sorry, which is already out, sorry. And so I'll read that this week and then probably talk about that on Sunday, which I haven't finished yet, so I'm excited to. But they have announced a new book for Zardu Layak, who is this space marine that gave the quote at the start. And he's a really interesting character. He basically sort of fills in for Erebus or Lorgar, for the word bearers, during the Siege of Terra, because Erebus has been pushed away from Horus's side and he's just serving the Chaos Gods, and Lorgar has committed his coup and then fucked off. So Zardu Layak's kind of an interesting character. He's got like these blade slaves, which are like word bearers that are like psychically controlled by him. It's pretty crazy, and he can't like take his mask off and stuff. So he's a pretty interesting character that could do with a bit of more of a backstory. So I'm excited to read that. And again, I guess it's sort of it'll be interesting to have a more palatable version of Chaos. And the interesting thing about Zardu Layak is that he basically implies in the Horus Heresy that he sort of knows there's a good chance Horus is going to fail and that Abaddon will be the true successor. So he is, he's basically implying that he knows Abaddon is going to be the future War Master. How did you find the time scale between chapters 1 to 7? I couldn't get a decent scale for it, but it seems too fast to see the Fall of Legator, or at least the lower glyphs. So, like, I get where you're coming from. Like, the fall of Borthus is very quick. The bishop, that comes very quickly in the novel, and that felt like that should have been a bigger accomplishment later on. Like, I kind of wanted to see him, because when he speaks to the crew and he brings the crew to his side, that was cool. I really like that. But then being able to turn a bishop, because once he's got Borthus, then everyone else sort of just starts to fall in line, and Borthus starts making ceremonies, running sermons for him, and they end up getting access to the speaker system, and he's able to kind of speak through the speaker system, and so yeah, it just kind of spins from there. But yeah, so I think I get what you mean. Like, I would have preferred to spend more time with him just kind of in the lower glyphs and turning people to his cause like that. Like, if it had been a bit more clandestine in that respect, it would have been cool. My favourite part about Cor Ferron was that he kind of could have won the Horus Heresy if he decided to sacrifice himself, but instead he chose to murder everyone in the room. Yeah, I mean, he's still doing pretty well though. Like, he is, like, he basically controls like half the Legion, I guess is what you'd say. And you know, now that Lorgar's back, he's ahead of him, but he seems to be operating relatively independently. He does appear in the Dawn of Fire series a bit, so he is up and about, and yeah, spreading the word of chaos. And he's concerned about the return of the Emperor, of course. I agree with that. My only issue with Apostle was the pacing. Things would start and be resolved so quickly. Yeah, I can see that. I guess I didn't mind it too much, because I guess the point is that once the cult starts picking up speed, then it's it's going to get a bit nuts from there. I think that yeah, I get where you're coming from. I think that at a certain point that I guess it would have just been repetitive to keep him having the same. Yeah, but it's interesting. Yeah, maybe it would have just been a bit repetitive to just have him keep making the same sermons to lower people in the lower caste. But it would have been interesting to see like him take over like one part of the lower glyphs and then kind of spread from there, maybe. But yeah, I get where you're coming from, because the whole angle of like a single space marine with, you know, because the apothecary is there to help him, but basically it's like a single space marine takes over a planet on his own, because it's his planet. He knows the details and he knows the culture, and so he's able to just kind of be a sermon. And you get like, it's quite interesting because, you know, when you read those 40K books and there's like a character in it who is known just by a name, you know, they'll be named like the preacher, or they'll be named like the angel or something like that, and they're you don't know who they are at the start of the book, and it'll be a like Space Marine protagonist novel or Inquisitor novel where the plot is about finding who this character is. It would have been interesting to see the other side of that. So he like creates an identity all of his own, and then he ends up just kind of curating cults, and the sisters are trying to track him down, and eventually he's just, you know, constantly moving places and takes over the planet that way. But for him to kind of get some big wins quite early on, and yeah, then it just kind of spirals out of a muck. But even by the time the sisters get there, they basically write off the planet, And yeah, I guess it helped that it was a scribe world, because he's able to set all of the fires alight. So it definitely looks like, you know, from the imperial citizenry point of view, if you worship the emperor, but all of the words of that religion start setting on fire, if that happened to you practically, you might start to doubt your own religion. So something else is doing something. Either that, or you're going to assume it's Satan or something. If they ever decide to kill Erebus, I hope the Lion or Jagatai can't do it. They are my two favorite Primarchs. Yes, I mean, so many characters to kill Erebus, of course. Litu probably be a good one. Abaddon would be a really good one. Yeah, the Khan would be a fantastic choice. Yeah, I mean, there's just so many options to kill Erebus. Like, who should it be? Yeah, it's one of those things. I'm not entirely sure you could write the death of Erebus and it be satisfying, because he just deserves to die. Also, a big point of contention I have is that people say Lorgar knew not to worship his father as a god, when the only material I have seen, Magnus is the only one to caution him. What do you think? Like, no. So I don't think that's not right. So, in like, to be fair, it is one of those things that's a bit odd, because a lot of it does happen off screen. But like, Monarchia is still, yes, the Emperor does rebuke Lorgar specifically for being slow, but I can't remember like a quote for quote example, but I am pretty certain he is told that the Emperor is not a god and not to worship him as a god. And like, both the Lion and Gilliman and talk about it, and Dawn talk about it, about how the Emperor always said he was not a god. And so whilst the conversation with Magnus that you're thinking of in First Heretic is definitely an example of that like, because weirdly his conversation with Magnus also sort of, I think, serves to like light a bit of a fire in him again, because when Lorgar speaks to Magnus, Lorgar wants Magnus to show him kind of the ways of the warp, and yeah, to teach him how to understand that there's like another realm, because Lorgar is basically just searching for truth at that point. And so he's convinced that there's more out there, and the fact that Magnus won't help him is, yeah, kind of just makes him want to press on even further. I wrote this earlier, but the world building in Apostle was fantastic. Like, 10 out of 10, awesome. Yes, I know what you mean. It's a great book in that respect. On a serious note, I didn't realize how powerful Erebus was until the chapter in The End and the Death, where he's able to control all the word bearers with a single word when they are rampaging. Yeah, I mean, he is a big deal, Erebus. He's definitely not something to be scoffed at. Even in early Heresy, he is still a phenomenal swordsman. Like, he's one of those space marines that gets into the cage and is willing to do bouts of combat. And of course, he's no match for Khan, but Khan is Khan. So he is an absolute monster. Like, yeah, the exact limits of his power are largely unknown, because, I mean, just as we see in Apostle, Erebus's power comes from the Chaos Gods bestowing power upon him and granting him power. And Gerastus, you know, there's some fantastic passages where, despite the fact that his Chaos cults are growing on the planet, you also see that it's not all sunshine and rainbows, and sometimes the Chaos Gods like reject him entirely. They don't give him what he offers. So like, he asks earlier into the book for demons to manifest on the world, because of course that will help him take the planet, and the Chaos Gods deny him, and they take an eye as payment from him, and he wounds open up across his mind, across his body, and it's only later on when his kind of like true purpose is revealed, which is that he thinks he has to sacrifice himself, but then he is saved. So it's yeah, he's going to go on to serve them even further. But Erebus is just the same, and I guess the reason he does so well is because the Chaos Gods are yet to grow bored of him. As long as that happens, he's going to keep crushing it. But yeah, one day he could piss them off. Same with any Servant of Chaos, isn't it? Do you think we likely get to see more Custodes and Word Bearers interactions? Yeah, I mean, yeah, no reason that we won't. So in like 40K, for example, they're very happy to capture Word Bearers and use them in their blood games. So yeah, they definitely will be interacting, and they are sort of like ultimate enemies. Using the word bearers in the setting is kind of the anti to the Star Child or the Imperial cult. Seems like a go-to thing, and anything that threatens the Emperor, the custodians are going to want to have a hand in. So we'll see. And we do know that well, first King in Yellow mention of the day, we do know that Valdor supposedly tried to go to the word bearers, Sikaris. They tried to go to Sikaris to supposedly get access to some information that he needs. So is Ghazghkull brutally cunning or cunningly brutal? Both, I think. Both, I think. Yeah, but he is. Yeah, I mean, like in the Yarrick books, they relay in. He is supposed to be just a whole other thing. Like he speaks to Yarrick in High Gothic, I remember, and like that's yeah, like never been done before. The Iron Warrior Civil War, the Dispute of Iron. Oh, okay, interesting. Yeah, I mean, so Imperial Armor Tome lore is one of those things that it's never really picked up on again. So unfortunately, I don't know if we'll ever get an answer because like I don't like it's kind of like War of the False Primarch type lore. Do you know what I mean? It's like a little paragraph that's thrown into a Imperial Armor Tome and then never mentioned again. So, yeah, I mean, I guess the most likely answer is going to be that Perturabo orchestrated the war between his sons because he wanted them to fight one another and become stronger. I would guess that's sort of like the most logical explanation, which I think is what the passage is trying to imply. But yeah, if you have a bigger conspiracy, I'd love to hear it. Think we'll see the events of two metaphysical spears from new perspectives in the next couple Scouring books. Yeah, that's a great point. Really good question, because in Two Metaphysical Blades, the book, yeah, that book. So in that book, in fact, I think I have a copy of it in my Kindle, but I'm pretty certain in that book, Russ is very down, and Trajan Valoris is the one who's kind of like perking him up, right? Because Russ feels like everything's ruined. Yes, okay, perfect. Okay, so I've got this on Kindle. So because I'm pretty like the reason that's very interesting is because in Ashes of the Imperium we get nothing from Constantine Valdor. He is silent. After the Emperor dies, Valdor is notably changed. And he like lashes out at the blood angels when they turn up in the throne room. He calls them like beasts. He's very clearly devastated by the death of the Emperor. He's of course had this vision when he fought against Abaddon, so Valdor's definitely going through something. And conversely, in Ashes of the Imperium, Russ is much more kind of upbeat. And although like I talked about in the video this week, although him and the Lion and Dawn are doubtful that the forces of chaos are actually done for, he's generally kind of moving forwards, and they're all sort of trying to be more unified, and they're much more positive and upbeat. But back when this was written, Russ says, yes, Russ is like, the greatest sin on Fenris is to fail your Jarl. And then Valdor places his hand on Russ's shoulder and exerts a faint pressure of reassurance. It is not over yet, Wolf King, Valdor says, in as sympathetic a manner as he ever managed. There are sagas yet. So this lore is sort of, it's not like been retconned or anything like that, and it's also by Chris Raitt, but I have a feeling that since he wrote that, which is a relatively old story, since he wrote that, I think they've changed the direction of Valdor and Russ, and of course Dan Abnett's pushed ahead with his King in Yellow storyline, so I think it's much more likely that lore is kind of like, I don't know if they'll lean heavily into it, because it's like I was saying, like their attitude in the Scouring now doesn't match their attitude in that book, and yeah, so it doesn't really work. Do you know see what I'm saying? So I suspect, yeah, I'll be interested to see if we do see any of them talking to each other. But my fear, and it's an understandable one, is that we actually just won't see much of Constantine Valdor at all, because Valdor is going to, yeah, basically retreat inside of himself and then ultimately disappear from the Imperial Palace. But yeah, Dan Abnett is obviously leaving it all in the mystery. King in Yellow mentioned, yes. I already threw one, but I'll throw up another. Habibi, the Orcs have spoken in High Gothic before. Do you not remember the diplomat during the War of the Beast? That's true. That's true. The War of the Beast is a good example. But even then, like of course the Beast could do, but I suspect it was still low Gothic in the War of the Beast. I can have a look. Someone should ask Chris Wright about it. Yeah, it'd be good. The thing is, if I was to meet him like that, I wouldn't want to annoy him, and I wouldn't want to be like, "Isn't your older book kind of outdated by your newer book?" I don't know what the nice way to ask that is, but that's kind of what I want to ask. And like, it's not like his fault. It's not like he did anything wrong, or he misunderstood the character, or he should have read something beforehand. It's not anything like that. It's just I think that since he wrote that book, Dan Abnett came up with this like crazy King in Yellow storyline, and it's only since that's happened that they changed the direction of Russ's and Valdor's character. Which areas of Wordbearer's lore would you like to see fleshed out or explored in the near future? So, yeah, good question. I mean, there's a few things that you can definitely do. So, the big one, of course, that is from the Dawn of Fire series, where the word bearers are relatively prominent, both in terms of actual word bearers and servants of the word bearers. They are creating an opposition to the King in Yellow. Sorry, not to the King in Yellow, to the Star Child. So they are aware that the Star Child is coming, and they are scared of it. And there's even a suggestion, they talk about it quite cryptically, but they do say that anybody who can master this power will control the greatest power in the universe. So there's even a suggestion that they think they might be able to turn the Star Child to the chaos, which seems unlikely because you're basically turning the Emperor to chaos, but have a crack, lads. So, yeah, creating an anti to the forces of chaos is definitely what you want to do. And the Hand of Abaddon's success in creating and reforging this new Anathane blade, which is able to pierce the Aegis of the Emperor, is like definitely like a good focal point for that. So I really just want to see a continuation of that plotline. I want to see more about Yang of Gathalamor. I really think that it's the phrase is thrown around quite a lot, but I really think she should become like the official Saint of Chaos, and she can have all kinds of crazy ability because she wields. She was blessed by all four Chaos gods. She like absorbed the heart of a Blackstone fortress, and she wields this incredibly powerful, unique blade. She should be a big thing. She should be big in the future of Warhammer 40K. In terms of Erebus, tough to know what to do with him. You want him to have a big aim. I mean, he works best on his own. He works best outside of Lorgar's thumb, and you want to see him like traveling about. And yeah, I don't know exactly what you do with him really. But yeah, I mean, he's still able to kind of pop all over the galaxy, and yeah, it's just tough to know what to do with Erebus. But yeah, that would be a big one. I think that this book will probably get a sequel if it does well, and then yeah, I think more of the same for this sort of lore. I think it was interesting. I think coming up with more lore for how the word bearers are bringing more worlds to the worship of the dark gods is definitely a good way forward. And then ultimately, it's all about going to be setting up the proper return of Lorgar. So what Lorgar wants to accomplish in Warhammer 40K is actually more interesting than you might suspect, because yes, Lorgar is going to want to just kind of create chaos cults and create worship of the dark gods, but like he's bigger than that. Do you know what I mean? Like he is in a way like the focal point of the dark gods worship, so he should have a bigger aim, and his aim can't really be to be the new emperor because he's a demon. But yeah, I want him to, yeah, I don't know exactly what I'd want to do with him. The most obvious answer is that he wants to be the anti-Star Child or something like that. In fact, anti-Star Child is not a bad title. But yeah, it would, yeah, seeing what they want to do with Lorgar's a tough one to decide what to do with, because he's kind of won in that respect. He just needs to ensure Abaddon's victory. Keelan, are you surprised with how powerful the Sisters of Battle are in Apostle? I thought that they were quite well, I thought that they were well written. In terms of how powerful they are, I guess the Sisters of Battle can be all over the place, can't they? That's, I guess, it's a problem. Is that because they are powered armored humans, There are books where they get overpowered by humans because they are basically also just strong humans. But then, yes, they should be able to go relatively toe-to-toe. But they do outnumber the word bearers by quite a large extent. And so it's not particularly possible. Like when in the final assault, like he's got, because the book opens with the word bearers. Basically, they're about to be destroyed, and Kerastes kills the other Dark Apostle, and it ends with a massive, like, there's so many more Sisters of Battle, and they've got air support, and they've got penitent engines, and they've got, you know, such a larger force, and there's what, like 17 word bearers, I think, at the end, something like that. And so yeah, they're just massively outnumbered. So I don't think they're too overpowered in the book or anything like that. I don't know if there's anything particular you're thinking of, but I think they were pretty well done. But there we have it. The new Word Bearers book is pretty exciting. Definitely would recommend this one if you're interested, not just in Word Bearers, just kind of chaos generally and how they kind of take over worlds. In theory, Lorgar Aurelian is back out in the galaxy, spreading the chaos cult and the word of the dark gods. The book does end with the Word Bearers kind of looking forward. The raptured of the Eightfold Bane are now going to begin a new crusade and spread the word of Lorgar even further throughout the galaxy. So it's pretty exciting times. But let me know what you thought. If you like this video, let me know what you think. Please do consider liking and subscribing and all that good stuff. Thanks for watching this stream. If you could help me appease YouTube's machine spirit by liking and subscribing, I would greatly appreciate it. If you couldn't make the stream live but want to ask me a question anyway, consider posting it in our community tab and I'll answer it next time. To support the channel, click the join button below, which will give you access to more content, and you can drop into the members Discord where all the coolest Terrans hang out, away from the watchful eyes of the Inquisition. Thanks for joining me, and until next time, I wait for you and I forgive you. Good night.